B2B marketers can leverage from B2C, and I'm sure of the vice versa as well. One of the key elements, and I think it dovetails very, very well with the B2B world, is B2B audience love content. Just give content. They're buying new server, no new PCs, no new software, whatever they are buying, they always love to learn more about the content. And going back to my original point about segmenting. So one of the things, just to give an example, one of the things that we have done over the period of time this year is a lot more of our life is from home. It is not just about working from home. And I, as a part of the executive team, I had a chance to lead all our efforts around working from home and things of that nature. And what we have realized is life is happening beyond work, but it is all happening from home. So for example, for parents, it's also homeschooling, schooling from home. It is also for singles, like even dating from home. It's also for us and elders, it's also telehealth, like medical from home. For us fitness buffs, it's also health from home. So life is happening from home, and different personas and segments have different needs. So what we have done is, like, instead of just addressing the immediate need of providing the cyber protection, we have started to build content to connect with these different segments differently. What we tell to the parents, so we have built content around what are the different resources available for homeschooling, having other parents share their experience that they have witnessed as they were homeschooling their kids. Same time, we have also written articles. We have put in our own research around how do you prepare for an interview. Some of our friends out there, because of the situation that we live in, have had a high unemployment rate. So when we look at that, how do we help people who have been impacted by this to prepare for an interview, to prepare for a job, what camera they should look, what setup they should have, how should they prepare? It's all new. People are onboarding. So we have put in our resources to connect at that level. I think it is unique. I also feel that this is something that our consumers are loving it. You have some of the best in class names put out there. Like Netflix doesn't show the same to me versus you. I'm more of a documentary buff, so they show me all the documentary which are relevant to me. And I'm sure when my wife has a different profile, they show her a different series that she watches. And I think that connect to the consumer or the customer, and building content around it and amplifying it to make sure that you're delivering it to the customer is something that I believe B2B will resonate fantastic, because that's exactly what that particular audience is looking for. Tell me about me. Tell me about my industry. I'm in healthcare industry. We have a different requirement. We have HIPAA regulations and things of that nature. So talk their language. Be authentic. Make them feel that you understand the challenges that they are going through, and you're talking their language, and then present the solution. You might be selling the same software in one industry versus the other industry, or the same hardware, or whatever your services are, but you want to start developing that relevant stories and relevant content that will jive to the audience that you're dealing with. And don't forget, end of the day, whoever is the decision maker, there is a human behind. So keep those elements also into your decision making and content strategy.
Yeah. I mean, all the stuff you're saying there around, thinking carefully about segments and, talking about homeschooling and understanding everyone's context. And I think that, the thing that we've seen over the past few months is that everyone's context is wildly different and people are juggling different things. And if you don't take the time to at least try and understand that and be sensitive to it, then you're missing a trick, I think and I think marketers understand this. I was reading a study the other day that said that 98% of marketers believe that personalization is the key to helping advance these customer relationships that we're talking about. But also in the same breath, so many of them, I can't remember the number, but so many of them were saying that they can't currently offer those personalized experiences. I mean, my feeling is that marketers want to be really good at this stuff, but there's a gap between their ambitions and what they're realistically able to achieve. Is that accurate in your view?
It is, and it has always been, like, having spent so many years in marketing, that has been true always, because by default, marketers are more aspirational, future looking, so they want more, because guess what? If you want to be personalized, you want to make sure you build that one-to-one relationship, the more you want technology to enable. It comes to a point where either technology has not caught up with what the need for the marketers are, which is being able to track the customers and engage and recognize who the customer where is. But there are other elements around privacy and protection, and which is something we also have to play, especially more so now than ever before, because browsers are coming up with their own policy restrictions in terms of how you can track the customers. Your cell phones are coming up with those restrictions. I'm sure there are platforms like we have social networks and search engines. They have their own environment that they operate on. So user privacy is very critical and important. And I always say it is not up for bargain or negotiation. So those are also, and there are regulatory requirements around CCPA, some of the other states looking into it, GDPR, and more rules and laws are being written. So keeping that in parlance, I think it is the new normal that we all have to start accepting as advertisers, and then go back to the core principles, like how can you be, I'm using your word, Nick, contextually relevant, because there is a lot of value you can derive from the contextual relevancy as well. For example, if somebody is reading more information about homeschooling, you don't need to really track this customers, what they have done in the past. You know that they are reading something about homeschooling. If there is an article which is related to a parent, you can actually show that as a relevant story. You don't need to really be dogmatic that you do have to have that pixel or cookie firing for you. You can leverage a lot of it contextually as well. Without getting into the too much detail, but I believe some of the platforms leverage contextually relevant signals as well. And there is a lot you can derive from contextually relevant signals.
Yeah, that's right. Particularly when you get into the level of kind of behavioral insights. So, how people are actually consuming your content, where are they spending their time, etc. A lot of this, to my mind, it drives towards really, as we've said, understanding of the individual and their context. And just to develop that thought for a minute there, one of the things that we talk about a lot at Turtle is psychology, and we're big believers that to be really successful with marketing, you need to understand how human beings think and make decisions, and the different drivers that we have. And particularly, we're talking there about, you discussed creating a new McAfee website, for example, thinking about how that's not just the information that's going to be on it, but how that's going to be assessed by someone coming to it, how they're going to navigate, all this kind of stuff, which leads into how we fundamentally, are influenced by the stimulus that's put in front of us. And we're big believers, as I say, that understanding that psychology and what makes us tick is really important. Is that something that you would subscribe to as well? Do you think that psychology is an important element of getting marketing right?
100%. I believe this is extremely powerful. And I use a different word. I always say you should always look for human truths, which is backed into psychology here, Nick. And this has been the mantra that I've done. Even when I'm looking for people to come join me as my leadership team, or even broadly, I'm always looking for members who are curious about the human truth. What's driving decision? What's driving human behavior? What's driving people behavior? And if you can influence with the exchange of value, human behavior, I think it is very powerful. Marketing over the period of time and in general technology has evolved more towards experimentation. So you're always hypothesis-led. You develop a hypothesis about why consumer or your customer is behaving a certain way, or what you would do would lead to a certain type of a behavior, which requires you to really go deep down and to understand what's the psyche, what are the frame of mind, what is the human truth behind that will govern that behavior. Take that as a hypothesis and we test it. And what technology has enabled is that you can actually test these hypotheses at scale with multiple different hypotheses. That's the experimentation framework. And I remember like 5 or 6 years ago, we were having conversation about type of talent we want to hire. And it's like, we need somebody who's psychology major, who really understands the depth of human behavior. And I also have data and analytics. Like, we can look into the behavioral science, but I think behavior studies can give you some elements of what AI will get to be. And I know machine learning and AI can give you a little bit more, but as marketers, our value would always be really understanding that human truth. And as I'm constantly looking for that, the people we are hiring, the day-to-day operations that we have, because this is powerful. This is what differentiates, in my opinion. If you understand your customer, you can really serve them well.
Mm-hmm. And so much of that comes into kind of the trust that we were talking about back at the start, and those human truths really are at the core of that trust. Just flicking back for a minute to the B2C, B2B discussion, just to get your quick thought on this. often we speak to people who, they accept that B2C, the psychology is very relevant, and there are all sorts of psychological factors at play. But some people tend to believe that B2B is like, you put on your suit or whatever. I mean, less people do that now than before, but you go to work and suddenly you change and you're not really influenced by these kind of factors in quite the same way. What's been your experience of that? I mean, I think I can guess, where you're going to come from on this, but would you say that, the same psychological factors are at play, B2B, B2C, it's all the same because we're all human beings, or is it slightly different?
It is. In my opinion, end of the day, the decision maker is also a human being who is making a decision. What B2B decision makers are looking for, whether you're talking to a CIO, CTO, CPO, whoever you're dealing with, is end of the day looking for that trust factor, and trust comes from within. So try to ask the same question. What would lead, like if you're going for a client A in your account-based marketing, what are the decision criteria? What are the trust factors that will influence a decision? How will you inculcate a trust in a type of accounts? If you crack that code, then rest is marketing, coming up with the messaging framework, go-to-market, et cetera, which are very similar. But trust is a very nebulous thing, and it's something you feel, but the more research is needed to really understand and unpack what drives trust. Now, there are trust equations out there. I would highly recommend the audience here to go Google trust equation, which is run by credibility, reliability, intimacy, and then self-orientation. So these are the 4 factors that kind of plays into any kind of trust building. You take those, start segmenting your customers based on how they influence trust. Rest is storytelling, narrative, messaging, and engaging authentically.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key things, that part of that trust, and I think you mentioned it there under intimacy. I think there were 4 headings. I think this would fall under intimacy, is being able to demonstrate that someone's understood and is being treated as an individual. I think none of us like to be treated like we're just a homogenous mass. We all like to be Sachin or Nick or whoever it may be, treated as the individual. And that's really where those segments and that understanding comes in. And this is where, at least to my mind, personalization is so powerful. And there's a psychological principle, which I think we discussed, called the cocktail party effect. And what that is that, if you're at a party, hopefully a socially distanced party in 2020, but nonetheless, and you're in a conversation and you hear your name in a different part of the room, people have actually studied this, and your brain actually kind of is magnetized towards that other conversation, and you actually are trying to listen to 2 conversations at once. I certainly have experienced this, and I'm bad enough at listening to 1 conversation, so 2 I'm really struggling. But it's that kind of thing, understanding that, and not just talking to a homogenous mass, but talking to Sachin, and making it clearly relevant for you. And if then once you go past that kind of superficial level of demonstrating it's for the individual, actually then speaking to their specific needs, be that homeschooling context or whatever, that's where you can use personalization really in 2 ways. Number 1, to get someone's attention, and to show actually this has been designed just for you, it's bespoke, and then also to develop the relationship afterwards, because by personalizing the content and making it contextually relevant and so on. So personalization can be tremendously powerful. Have you been able to leverage any of that at McAfee, and what results have you seen?
Yes, so not the personalization at the name level, because I think we get into the PII world. So keeping those aside, but yes, personalization works like a charm for us, and it's a journey, because as you learn more, as you test more, you get better returns, and you start personalizing more. We generally do one-to-many kind of a personalization. So we, for example, to give a point, like McAfee comes pre-installed in many of the PCs that people are buying. There are a variety of different reasons why people buy PCs. For example, one of them is, hey, you bought this really heavy machine, and this machine is for number coding or some kind of a number crunching. The need for security is different. So the way we engage with them in terms of the content and other things is different. For a gamer is different. Like gamers want to get the last possible juice out of the processor or CPU out there. And I think the conversation we're trying to have with them is very different versus somebody who's a casual web surfer, and you want to make sure everything that they are doing on the web is protected. So our overall evolution has moved away from purely device centricity towards more life and personal security in totality. Today, and as you said, shows like people are not just looking to protect your device. You're actually looking to protect yourself, your household, your family, your loved ones. That is more powerful. And that is not just, say, the file system that you have. It is also the trust, the privacy, the identity, and things of that nature. So we approach it from that life stages and jobs to be done, and then personalize based on that to our customers. And we have seen significant results. We have done gazillion A/B tests based on this, and we have seen both human behavioral difference as well as the level of engagement that we are looking from these customers. It's a journey. I won't say we have cracked the code fully, and that's what the fun part of it is, because the next 2 years, the cybersecurity attacks would be very different. Would be the last decade. So it's always a game of really evolving yourself, and personalization has really worked very well for us in general.
Yeah. It's you said a couple of particularly interesting things in there, just around, understanding, again, I know we're using this word a lot, but understanding the context that these customers are in. So, understanding that they want to protect themselves in a broader sense. It's not just about protecting their computer, it's about protecting that broader, personal, life that they have. And then speaking, as you say, in very segmented, very personalized ways into those people. It's great. Like, it's exactly the kind of stuff that, we're sort of very much like pushing for. So it's great to hear that you're doing that at McAfee.
And just to add to what you said earlier, just to add a little bit more, and it is very, very relevant for the B2B world as well.
Yeah.
In B2B, there is not always one decision. There are multiple stakeholders that are involved, and they're solving for different things. For example, if somebody is selling us, we are engaging with the technology partners. They're coming in telling us, hey, this is the product that can help you really get the best out of your marketing dollars. If you're talking to me, I would be more interested to hear when someone sends me an email which talks about get 2x your leads, 2x on your return on investment, and that immediately catches my attention. Deliver your get 20% lift in your personalization. Very different messaging as a business owner, decision maker, versus someone reaching out to people in our IT teams, like most secured email marketing platform. It's a very different messaging altogether, because the criteria that they are solving for are different. So put a person behind and what their psychology is, and then try to contextualize. I would still advise just try to move away from a very one-to-one personalization, because it is not possible, and you'll get into the privacy restrictions, but have that contextually relevant to your personas and talk differently. One account has multiple decision makers, and you might want to engage with them at a different level of content or outreach that you want to think of. They're not all same. And I think that's an important distinction that must be kept in mind, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So, we've talked a lot about, the ways to do this and the motivation behind it. But as we said at the start, most people, most marketers, I think it was 98%, so basically all marketers agree that this is important, but then so many of them struggle to do it. And, there's a really helpful model. I think McKinsey have this model for personalization, which is the 4 Ds that they talk about, which is data, which is, as you're saying, you need to understand who you're talking to, what they're interested in, etc. Then you need decisioning, is the second D. And this is where you take that information and then work out, okay, so what do we send to whom and when, and how does that work? Third one is then design, which is you need to actually be able to execute kind of at scale and dynamically different content or different assets that need to go based on the decisioning. And then you need distribution, the final D, the ability to send it to them. And one of the things that we discussed when we spoke earlier, Sachin, was about the data, and really that unless your data is in order, you're not going to be able to leverage it through the decisioning and through the design and the distribution in order to give the customer what they need. So in your experience, and you've kind of touched on some of these things already, but that data piece, what tends to be in that realm, what tends to be the biggest data headaches for marketers?
Yeah, it's amazing. But these very well line up in the consumer world. The 4 key core tenet of any level of personalization, at least from my standpoint, has been the content creative, media, which is the channel and distribution in yours, and D was the design. The content creative was the design. And then the third one is data. Data is common. And the last one is audience, which I think is a decision making. And so they align very, very well. We're talking different Ds, but we're talking almost the same thing, just using different words. Personalization is hard. It's not easy to do. It requires all these right tandem of 4 elements to work and play together. So I think probably that could be one of the reasons which is limiting us, limiting advertisers to marketers to follow this. To your specific question on data, I think that's a heavy lifting that any kind of personalization effort requires. First and foremost, you want to be able to get your customer touchpoint information at one place. Create a unified customer ID that you can track. So for example, when Sachin is engaging with a particular piece of software, Sachin has downloaded a piece of software and it's a content, then Sachin has also come to the website, Sachin has received to an email, Sachin has had a conversation with the sales guy. If you start creating these customer graphs, that is one of the most important elements to be able to start doing the personalization, because when you review this at an aggregate basis, you can build models around and content around and insights around many Sachins who come into that particular segment. So technologies like CDP, customer data platforms, have evolved to kind of solve for some elements of this, but it does require a thoughtful architectural conversation with your engineering team, with your operations team, where you put the pixel, how you're going to track it, and then marketing team to start thinking of what kind of campaigns you want to generate on. So I would say you would have to do bottoms up, start from the data in terms of collect all the data and bring it at the same place where it is easily accessible and connected to the activation platforms through the marketing technology. But you also need top down or starting from outside in. So you have an inside out, which is data, and outside in perspective, it starts with the customers. Like what type of personalization do you want to drive? And then look for the data, because you may not want to boil the ocean to get go, but at least if you do outside in, you can start with some level of personalization and start connecting system. But one of the most important fundamental element is break the silos of your data. Data needs to be at the same place for it to be democratized and leveraged and amplified through the marketing technology. The more fragmented solution you look, the more integration points you have to look, and that's where you lose the data. The match rates between different systems are usually low. So if you choose for a too many fragmented solution, you're actually losing your ability to track the customers. Now, there are solutions out there, but that's just one other hurdle that you would have to look for.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It reminds me of a conversation that we had with a very, very large software vendor, one of the largest ones in the world, where we had 3 or 4 different conversations, and it was like speaking to 3 or 4 different companies, because they had no record of us having had conversations with any other department or any other team. So you were kind of starting from scratch, and that really did nothing to build the relationship or the trust that we've spoken about that's so important. So that centralized data store is really important, I guess, even outside of personalization, even just in terms of offering a great experience. But I think that particularly, when you're trying to do personalization, it can only be as good as the data behind it. And if that's not centralized, and if you aren't bringing all the different streams into a CDP or whatever it happens to be, that's going to be a real challenge. But kind of getting that data. I mean, you spoke there about tracking pixels and other sort of bits and pieces. But I think a lot of companies, I think I'm right in saying, still live in a world where there's a fair amount of kind of manual work in getting that data, getting it into shape, getting it tidy, getting it usable, etc. But if we're going to do this at scale in a reliable way, finding ways to automate this and make sure that the data is clean at the point where it goes in, so that we can create this kind of virtuous circle almost, where we're using good data, and therefore we're sending good content or good materials, and then because we're tracking that, we're getting more good quality data back. Creating that virtuous circle is incredibly important, I think, if we're going to try and scale these things. So that's something that I know you mentioned that you've kind of had a look at McAfee. You referenced tracking pixels and so on, but where would you recommend that people start with that kind of challenge?
Yeah, so generally there are 4 stages in terms of getting all the data in. One is the data collection, then you get into data preparation, and then you get into more data crunching or insights, and then the last one is activating based on data. As you get into the journey, you'll see your teams are spending more time in data collection, just getting an inventory of all the data that is available at this point. And once you have the data cleaning or cleansing or preparation takes a lot of time to begin with. And that is where I feel that you would really get the insights. For example, hey, we have these amazing list of information, everything available from a particular event, particular interaction with the customers. But guess what? We never stored email address in this. And we never connected it back to who actually the customer is. So like, okay, we have this amazing data. You can analyze it in an aggregate, but you really are missing the connect point. So it's the data preparation layer is where you will start to get the insights. Okay, so now we have to re-go and look into re-architecting how you will track the customer between the systems. You can still have multiple systems as long as there is an enablement, for example, either through server-to-server integration or through pixeling or through onboarding technologies where email hashes can work, where you can deal with the PII and non-PII kind of information. And over the period, and this is a process. This is an arduous process that you have to get through. But once you set it up, you'll realize the data preparation will start to shrink, or you'll pick up another data preparation work, and more information, more time is spent into data insights. What you really want to get to and you are aspiring for is an automated data activation and running some kind of a machine learning models on top of that, as if your business allow or mandates it. But you will start with first the inventory assessment, which is data collection, and then spend a lot of time in data preparation. Think of the end state, how you're going to use, how you're going to track the customer, how you're going to build that story that you're trying to build in, and see if your current set of data allows that or not. And I can guarantee most of the time you will find that it was never thought through. It was never built. The data was collected for the purpose of a particular purpose of collecting the data, but the end goal of you leveraging that data to personalize wasn't something that was thought through holistically in the past. And that's just the nature. Every company who's in this journey has gone through. It's painful, but the results are very, 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 very beneficial. The good thing is industry is in, if I go on my limb, I would say at least 5 to 10 years advanced in this. So there is a lot of outside help you can go on into. You can get consultants. You can have the right set of people who can help you go through this particular process.
Yeah, and I think that point around starting from where you want to end up, if that makes sense, like digging the tunnel backwards, like how do I want to leverage this data, and then what data do I need? And then that point as well around, once you've got that in place and you've done a lot of the hard yards, it should be self-reinforcing. The data should generate more quality data, which should generate more quality data, and so on. But one of the challenges, obviously, that people are going to have in 2020 and in 2021 is obviously like finding ways to set this up, get the technology in place and the people, and work out how to scale it. Particularly because budgets are obviously up in the air at the moment for many people. So how have you handled that? How have you managed, through 2020 and plans for 2021 to scale up what you're doing in terms of content and experiences and personalization, all of this great stuff we've been talking about? What's been your kind of strategy for scaling this up?
Yeah, I think everyone would agree, whether it is 2020 or any time, you never have enough time, enough resources. So it's a constant challenge. The way we sit at the backbone of the internet. So for us, the need for our businesses is there right now because more people are online. There are more attacks that are happening. Only 9% of the consumers are really feeling safe when they are online. So the need for our services is higher. So it has really helped us as a growth business for us. And for many businesses, what used to be future for many businesses is present now. So what the current times has really enabled us is really step back and think. The future is here and it is now. How do you invest into the infrastructure project, into the core foundational project that can really prepare you well for 2021? Yes, it's a backseat. Yes, it is an investment, but 2021 is going to be a new year altogether. And it's going to be new normal. The way we lead our life, the way we engage, the way we consume technology, the way we work, live, or what have you is going to change. Look for that and invest into your foundational today. That's how we started with and have built business case and other things recognized for it. The other benefit, which this time has unveiled, the silver lining is what I'm looking for, is the concept of globalization, the concept of remote working and remote collaboration was foreign to many companies. And I've been in that shoe as well. It's like, hey, we should be in the same location, same people. You can talk, you can go to the whiteboard, and there is no taking away for that. There is benefit for that, but we are all remote. We are having these amazing forums as we are having right now, all virtual. Fantastic, great job to Brand Innovator to leading this. But what we have learned from this is we can work remotely. So what that means is an opportunity to explore other capabilities or resources which are either more effective, more cost efficient elsewhere that you can leverage. So if you have a business in New York, like, there are talent and capability available on the other side of the coast and other places, for example, in Florida, Texas, etc. Explore those talents over there. A great university across the nation. Can you get fresh talent from there and quickly train them and help you get accelerate for these elements? Are there resources available in Europe or Asia who have the leg up on that? So explore those opportunities, because guess what? Everybody is remote, and you can develop that new muscle today, which can really help you with 2020. And that's how we have approached it. And I won't say it was a cakewalk when you're having a conversation with your CFO, but at some point you put yourself out there, you have a plan, you have a strategy, and if it makes sense and numbers align, things do work out. Because have a long-term view. Don't solve for 2020. Have that long-term view that allows for your business.
Oh yeah, I think that's absolutely right. You know, the long-term view is so important. And, you know, one of the things that we're seeing, Sachin, which I think you're kind of hinting at there, particularly with the kind of video conferencing point, is that, you know, although we're apart, people still do want that human connection. People still do want those relationships, and I think what we've seen is a number of customers, you know, really trying to work out how do you offer those at scale when you can't meet people face to face. So we've seen large numbers of people trying to work out, how do I make my sales decks more personalized? How do I make sure that they're relevant? Because I can't meet this person face to face to read their body language anymore. So I need to look at behavioral insights in terms of how they're consuming my content, and I need to make sure that the content and the materials that I'm interacting with them are personalized, are relevant, do take account of their context. So a lot of work in that area. And what we've seen a lot of customers navigate towards is this idea of modular content, which is the idea that content can be designed in such a way that it's not a single monolithic piece. It's different sections and different pieces. And when it's being sent to you, Sachin, we take this one, this one, this one, and this one, and put them together like that. When it's sent to me, they're reassembled. And what that lets you do is essentially create a single asset, because, you know, it's just a sequence of modules. But then to have an infinite number, really, of different permutations and different ways to use this, which allows you to, through content, develop that trust and those relationships through personalization. So we've seen a lot of our companies that we work with start to gravitate towards these things, and as you say, seeing that as the long-term view of where things are going to go. Because, you know, maybe we do all go back to meeting face to face, but I think that people are still going to want that kind of experience. So it's a good long-term play.
Yeah, I think it is two very good points. One, I always ask this question: if you're doing anything twice, try to automate it. Use machines to do the job that humans are currently doing, so that humans can do more value-added work, trying to look for that human truth, etc., etc. So automation does play a very significant role in terms of overall productivity enhancement as well as the efficiency enhancement. And the second, and this is more, again, softer metric as you think of, people appreciate personalization more today than they did a year ago. That's my hypothesis, because we are in this world where you're dealing with, I'm a father, I'm a professional, I'm also a fitness person, I'm also a cleaner in the house, I'm also the cook, I'm also the teacher, etc., etc. You're playing all these different hats. A little gesture of making your life better, personalization, can go a long way of creating that level of appreciation for that. So ability to build that relationship, the sensitivity would be much higher today. So take that extra step, take that extra leap to build and personalize and make somebody's life a little bit easier. And the returns of those would be longer term relationships in general. Don't do it for the purpose of doing it, but genuinely feel in making that life easier, and you would see the returns on that investment towards the relationship building will go a ton more, because my hypothesis, the sensitivity around those is much higher today than it was ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing that I always think, Sachin, around that is, we're all sitting at home, and a piece of content or a communication that doesn't hit the mark feels like an invasion, right? Whereas if you're able to kind of reach through the screen and demonstrate, I understand you, and I can help you, and I'm going to demonstrate that. That's quite amazing when you're kind of sitting in your home and a business is able to make that connection with you. And I think going right back to what we said right at the start, that's the thing that, the Amazons, the Netflixes, etc., have worked out that is so powerful to us, because they also connect with us while we're in our homes. And a generic, unpersonalized, bland experience is like, it feels invasive, whereas one that's personalized, tailored, as I say, builds the relationship, builds trust, is super powerful. I'm very conscious of time. I think we've probably got a minute or so before we can go to questions, but just to kind of pick your brains on this final kind of point, who do you think is doing this particularly well at the moment? Are there any sort of companies that you think are doing this particularly well? Obviously McAfee, but any others that you'd share as being ones for people to look at for inspiration?
I would say I don't have visibility into all these elements of cost and other things for these companies, but I think Microsoft is doing a fantastic job of how they have transformed themselves. I mean, you go to their website, the way you engage with the product. I bought a new PC, and the way it has engaged with me, it is really good. And what I could tell from the website is they have really personalized and also looked at more from consumer angle versus a purely demarketing between B2B and B2C. So they've really merged the experiences together, so it becomes more of a continuum. And they're leading with product. They're leading with consumers out there, and I like that about Microsoft. This is what I could tell from how they are doing it on their site, as well as their outbound marketing that I have received. So I would just seek guidance from them, seek inspiration from them. They're doing a really good job. There are many other companies that come to mind, but I think in the interest of time, I'll probably just give one example for the time being, because it's such a big company, and they're doing so many different things in B2B, B2C. Within B2B, there's so many elements that each one of us can drive inspiration outward what they're doing.
Yeah, very interesting. Just final thing before we do go to questions. The reason why we flagged up here, reducing acquisition costs, lifting revenue, increasing spend. These are some of the benefits that we've seen at Turtle from adopting, this methodology. For example, we've had, booking 50% more initial meetings with people if we're going out with personalized outreach. So rather than saying, hey, we'd like to speak to you, sending a totally bespoke piece of content, all in the customer's brand, doing that at scale with automation, finding ways, as you say, to repeat or to handle repetitive tasks without, them becoming a huge time sink. We've seen tremendous results, as we've seen here. But at McAfee, I mean, you've hinted at some of these things, but presumably have you seen some of these results, all results? What's kind of like the shining star in terms of what you've been able to achieve with personalization?
I think you have mentioned many of them there. Of course, acquisition CAC, acquisition cost is an important one. There's lift. These seem very efficiency-driven metric, and I think you have to think from efficiency standpoint as well. But there is another element from the top side is customer lifetime value. I'm a fundamental believer that you should always approach from customer lifetime value is, yes, you got the customer, but what is it that they're going to generate over the period of time? So I would just add CLV to this. We've seen tremendous success. Anything we do, we are inherently a loyalty business. So when we acquire someone, generally they stay on for many, many years, because you're not going to give your SSN information to one company to the other company for a difference of $5 to $10. It's a very personalized product. So I would add customer lifetime value, and we have seen tremendous lift on that as well. And few other things that we measure from the personalization, I think you have impact metrics here. A few other things that we measure are outcome metric, and we define outcome as consumer behavior. So for example, engagement, which is activating a certain set of features, activating certain level of service or certain level of protection, running your scans more regularly, adding VPN when you're on a public Wi-Fi. So we also look for some of those outcome-driven metric, which is consumer behavior-driven metric, and lift in those. We have a correlation and other things back to the financial impact, but those are the other things that personalization has really helped us drive forward in terms of our consumer engagement. And again, we are a loyalty business, so for us, these elements are important. Customer lifetime value is very, very important, because it's hard to acquire a customer, than to retain one. I mean, at least from cost standpoint. So for us, lifetime value is very, very important, and we are looking for those consumer behavioral trigger to really drive the personalization.
Yeah, Sachin, I have a million more questions that I want to ask you, but I think I'm being nudged that we need to let someone else ask some questions. So we've had a few come in, and there's some quite interesting ones in here. I'm trying to pick one to begin with. I think this is quite interesting. When you have hundreds of clients, how do you get deep enough with personalization? And we've covered some of those elements, but specifically, how do you get deep enough with the personalization effort?
Yeah, I think you all first try to take those 100 clients and try to put them in some level of buckets. Something segment. So you look for size of the company. You can segment them based on which industry or vertical they are in, because that also they have common traits. The smaller size companies have similar traits than some of the similar traits than the bigger size companies, and healthcare has similar traits together versus financial industries. Then there are other ways you can do is you can actually go step back and start looking into need-based segmentation or decision-based segmentation. It's like how are the decisions are made in these. So once you have segregated into these different categories, and then you look at which companies kind of align well with what the value proposition you're offering, and then start with the contextual level targeting on this. And as you're finding success, leverage your sales force. I'm assuming this is for B2B audience. Leverage your sales force to develop and qualify those accounts further. So if you want to build an ABM, account-based marketing type of effort around that as well. And once you decide for that, there are a variety of different platforms you can do it. LinkedIn is a fantastic platform from B2B standpoint, but don't forget, you can also leverage other social platforms like Facebook, etc. YouTube is a great platform to engage from content standpoint. Even your own website or CRM technologies like email. So you could get to it, you would have to make it, but what it really comes down, start with segmentation and start channeling it down in terms of prioritization, leverage your sales force so that you know where you really want to go after, and then start working towards your marketing message. So it does come down to some level of prioritization.
I mean, I think the point around segmentation initially is that's exactly what we've done. But the thing that we've added on top of that is building on this idea of modular content. We've hypothesized around, well, this segment will appreciate this, and this segment will appreciate that. But then as we trying to get into a virtuous circle to see, well, was that hypothesis right? Was it wrong? Oh no, they read about something completely different. We need to update what we're doing. And what we found is that when you get that all singing, and when you get the data flowing and you get the content being created, as we said, with the 4Ds or however you were describing it, you end up very quickly in a kind of a virtuous circle place where you're reinforcing and you're honing things down rather than just continually guessing. It's basically like one big science experiment, with hypotheses and and outcomes and then some conclusions.
It is true, and I'll just add to that to another example. Like, for example, if you're reaching out to medical industry, and if you just send an email which just says, is your CRM solution HIPAA compliant? I bet you people will open the email and they would want to read a little bit more about that. It's one-to-many personalization.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it doesn't, you can try something else and you kind of go from there. I think we've probably got time for at least one more question. This is a really interesting one. What do you see as the biggest future challenge to retail and e-commerce? And equally, what's the biggest opportunity?
The biggest challenge we have kind of already talked about is as the role of privacy and other things evolve, I think marketers have to start thinking about this is going to be a world where being able to one-to-one target is going to be challenging. Also, to be able to measure the impact of your marketing investment is going to be a little bit challenging, because you will not be able to get the measurement at the final deliverable that you have, because you can't measure it at the impression level. So as more and more world becomes less trackable, more privacy compliant, we will have lesser measurement as well as ability to target. So it kind of pushes the retail as well as e-commerce marketers to think about how that is. The biggest opportunity, in my opinion, is an omni-channel experience. Today, I still believe that e-commerce and retail operate in their own silos because they might be organizationally separated and have different VPs going after a different side of the business. Try to connect your experience. Somebody's in store and somebody's online. Try to connect that experience. Let them complement each other. Huge value. Use virtual reality and augmented realities to connect digital experience with the physical experience. This omni-channel experience is a huge opportunity, and I still feel only fewer and fewer advertisers and marketers are really taking advantage of that. Big opportunities in the e-commerce and retail space, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree. Absolutely. Esther, I can see you're back. Are we out of time?
Hi, I'm back. That was so great, guys. I took so many notes about how we can take this kind of spirit and thoughts into my business, but also the point that you made, Nick, I wrote down, because these were the words I think about. I'm someone who takes in a lot of content, and this thought that content that doesn't hit the mark is an invasion, which is like so much how I think about it and how I feel. I really love that. And thank you, Sachin. That was a really wonderful panel. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Sachin.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Esther. Bye.
So for our next and last session of the day, we are thrilled to be joined by Gabriel Alonso. Gabriel is the head of digital platforms and community for energy at PepsiCo. This session will be moderated by Gabrielle Heyman, the head of global ad sales at Zynga. Welcome to the stage, Gabriel and Gabrielle.
Hi there. Thank you.
Hi. Take it away, guys.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, nice to see you again.
Likewise.
I always say it's so much fun to have my named twin be on a panel with me, so I'm excited for today.
Yep.
So we were able to catch up yesterday. Maybe you could give just a quick intro to everybody about how you're pretty new to Rockstar, where you've been, like your kind of career up to dates, because we're going to cover a lot of your experience today.
Yeah, sure. So, recently joined Pepsi about 2 months ago. It's been quite the journey so far, trying to onboard into a new company during these pandemic and COVID times, right? But prior to that, I was at Activision for almost 3 years, leading CRM strategy there, working mostly on Call of Duty, but also some of the other titles as well, and supporting them. And before that, I was at Nike for a while, where I started in social, leading the global running category, the social team there, and then eventually transferred into the membership team. So working specifically on Nike Plus and that kind of loyalty program and platform, did everything from editorial frameworks and strategies, content strategy, triggered strategies, all of the above. I did a lot of different things there, wore many, many hats. And then prior to that, I was in New York for almost a decade doing a bunch of different things, but still in like the social editorial space.
Right. Okay. Got it. You're in LA now.
Yes.
As am I. So we're coming to you from the West Coast. So that's a lot of varied experience. You've got, apparel, athletic apparel, gaming, and now beverage. What made you what are the tools you feel like are best relevant to your current role that you did in your previous roles in terms of CRM? Where's the overlay?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, my background's a little varied, but I feel like it's all in some way, shape, or form sort of built off of each other. And for this role in particular at Pepsi, right, really thinking about it as a holistic digital role. So it's not just social, it's those social platforms, but it's also .com, it's CRM. We work closely with our media teams as well. So it's really trying to connect the dots on the entire digital ecosystem. And so when I think about my career, I've been able to sort of segment every bit of that digital ecosystem in its own way, right? Focus first on social, focus a little bit on kind of broader content strategy, work a little bit in CRM now and thinking about audience segmentation, leveraging data accordingly. And now it's like, how do you put all those things together, right? So how can you tell stories at scale, but also in a way that you're doing it so that it feels like you're being one-to-one, right? And you're actually telling the right story to the right person in the right place at the right time. That would ultimately be the goal. And so I feel like kind of through my varied career rather, I'm getting closer and closer to that aspiration, in trying to do that. And so with Pepsi, I'm working, specifically on brands like Rockstar Energy Drink and whatnot. It's really starting to look at, okay, who's the old energy consumer, who's the potential new one, how are we connecting those two segments, audience segments, in particular consumer segments, and kind of retaining the core, retaining our old folks, the ones who've been with us since the beginning, but also trying to recruit, and those could be, that you could do both of those things with different kinds of content, but maybe also some of the same, depending on how you chop it up and where you put it, et cetera. So, I'm just kind of excited to come in and create a lot of great stories and bring our brands to life, but then leverage what we know about them, and frankly the Pepsi machine to help us target and get that content in front of the right people to drive the bottom line, drive conversion, get cans in hands, as they say, and as I've learned. So
I like that. So so you said a lot there. I want to go back to something you said like several sentences ago, the right story, right time, for the right person.
Mhm.
And I would love to explore that concept a little bit. Something that has always concerned me about personalization is that you start not necessarily, you don't know who you don't know. So you're maybe speaking to a group of people, and there's another group over here that would be a hand raiser, but because you're looking at certain indications of who that consumer is and where they are and what they're doing. What do you think about that? And really quick anecdote, like years ago, I worked at Yahoo, and their first personalized homepage, right? Ultimately, I thought that all I cared about was Real Housewives and like baby murders, because I had got some articles and that was all I got. But I'm much more than that. Like I like the stock market, I like fashion, so tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I actually have a really great anecdote for that as well. So when I was at Gilt.com, obviously, if you're familiar with Gilt, it was kind of like democratizing sample sales for the masses. You could get, every day at noon Eastern, new sales would come up and people would flock to the site at like 11:58 trying to get everything, right? But the crux of that was they were sending, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of personalized emails every day to let you know the sales for you. And I was on the menswear team, and all my emails should have been menswear, but there was a couple of weeks where I was buying stuff for baby showers for friends. And then all of a sudden I started getting a ton of baby things in my emails. And I was like, whoa. This is not for me. I was just buying a gift. Right. And so just kind of to using your Yahoo example, it's the same thing, right? Where personalization can sometimes go a little too hard in the paint. And I think you have to figure out how you can balance the sort of explicit and implicit factors of what goes into those personalizing factors, right? And it'll always be a little wonky, I'm sure, because it'll never be perfect. But in terms of how we can get to that place, one of the things in my previous role at Activision we really tried to do was base it off of specific sort of consumer, like I'll call them tipping points or moments of truth, right? Where we would know after a certain set of actions or inactions, we wanted to throw some content in front of a player to get them to do something. Generally, it was to play more or buy more, or something like that. And so, like being able to create and establish a journey to really begin understanding sort of what your consumers are going through, and then hitting specific points, I think can start to tackle that question of like, am I missing anybody? Am I not missing anybody? Are people getting the right things? Because ultimately for me, I think personalization shouldn't be super cold and exacting and ones and zeros. It should be a little bit of that question and answer. It should be a little warm. It should feel like I'm getting to know you, because then it doesn't creep me out as a consumer, and the brand continues to learn based on how you react. And so once we figured out what those sort of moments of truth were, we were able to create messages across in-game content, emails, even SMS as well, to keep nudging people forward. And then you learn, you see what works, what doesn't, and you go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I also being at Zynga and working in the games industry, I think that game publishers are really experts at that, at tuning it. Like, how far can you push it? When are you surfacing when the person's going to buy something? Are they ever going to buy something and you show them something else? to monetize them, and then obviously engagement across the board, whether it's on social channels, emails, etc. So, so that's an interesting concept. In one thing when we spoke yesterday that I thought you said that was really interesting, and this is sort of in line with something you said in our first bit at the end. There was like content and engaging content on multiple platforms and reaching, a younger consumer and your loyal consumer. And I thought what was kind of interesting yesterday is you were speaking about the mashup of game, sports, music, and like there might be like a snowboarder, but they're like a great chef, and so how you're engaging on that platform to reach your consumer. What are examples of that, of bridging cultural experiences, and what kind of social platforms do you find right now are the best to leverage that?
Yeah, for sure. I think we as Energy have a lot of space to play in a lot of different parts of the culture, right? You talked about music, gaming, and sport. I think a good example of how these sort of cultural lines are getting blurred is kind of what some of these young NBA players are doing since they've been in the bubble, right? Where they're streaming Call of Duty, they're doing their own vlogs, they're still playing basketball. And so they're bringing their communities and bridging them in a way that is incredible. I mean, I watch Twitch probably more than I should. But I'm watching guys who are FaZe Clan members play with Celtics basketball players, and you're like, this is crazy, right? Because now as a kid, I'm seeing two of my heroes come together in completely disparate worlds. And at least for me growing up, I would never see Ken Griffey Jr., playing something with a favorite musician or something of mine, right? That just wouldn't work. And so I love how Twitch is starting to be that one of those platforms, I think, where they're starting to bring in different personalities who are being connected by similar tastes, whether it be games or something else. Another interesting platform that I've been it's been top of mind lately, a former Nike colleague of mine is now the CMO, Tessa Aragonis, is I've been kind of trying to figure out Discord for myself as a user, joining a bunch of different communities, just to see how it works. And I could see that very easily being a place where, through the way that you develop channels and bring in different fans and give them different roles and things like that, where it could be a place where you could actually cultivate these sort of cross-cultural connections across your community by giving them places that you own to talk about music, gaming, sport, cooking, or whatever it might be, right? And now you are a part of that conversation and can act as that sort of facilitator of relationships, as well as community.
Mm-hmm. And then, what is when you do something like that, which is all of these ideas, it's like part art, part science. Where does the science part come in, where you're taking that feedback loop and making it like a CRM tool?
Sure. For me, it's a little bit harder to do, at least from what I understand, when you start talking about some of these earned platforms like your Discords or your Twitches. So one of the things that I'm excited to build out on the Energy side is an actual CRM program where we can leverage any first party data that we've gotten from sweeps and contests, as well as any Pepsi data that they have that we can obviously leverage. That's the beauty of being a part of a big brand, to start informing, start creating sort of these these custom segments that we can use across media around interests and various other things, to start really honing in on our content, what works, what doesn't for certain segments, as well as to get a better understanding of who's actually playing in these places. Yeah, it's a little hard for me to say, how would Discord work or something like that. But when it comes to having an owned platform where we can house a lot of this content and experiences, whether it be e-commerce or something like that, where we're ingesting first party data to then take that information to spit back out in the form of an email or some other piece of content that is valuable to drive an additional purchase or an additional action with the brand. Yes, that's the ideal. That's what we did, at Guild. Thing that was happening on the site, whether it was in consumer purchase behaviors or even browsing behaviors, things like that, played into the emails and the content you got in the emails, and then that would just kind of cycle through and keep you hopefully within our ecosystem. So.
Yeah, I think what seems really exciting right now is the acceleration of e-commerce, especially since COVID, and how all of those personas and segments you were talking about building, you really can do a very direct conversion call like right there nowadays, and more than ever, versus like going to 7-Eleven or going to like the market to buy your product. I think that so much of the research that I've done in the beverage category and CPG category in general is the acceleration of e-commerce, and everything from things that I wouldn't even have thought of. Like I had a chat with Coke, and they were talking about platforms like Postmates and Uber Eats and making sure you have presence there and things like that. So I don't know, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, about how you're on the digital side and how much you can really impact, e-commerce.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'd be lying if that wasn't something that I was excited to kind of dive in and tackle as part of this new role. I think where we need to be mindful is, there's a way of doing things. We have tons of great customer relationships. And we need to understand how we can, balance all that potentially. I think ultimately, though, where e-commerce is important is it allows us to have a platform, or any brand really, to have a platform to be nimble and sort of flex with the changes in how consumers purchase and what they want. And so, if you can have a really seamless supply chain in that regard, where you can shift product packs or even connect yourself to like more instant delivery from your Uber Eats or your Instacarts or what have you, then you're really serving that consumer need very quickly. And I think that's where the in this day and age, in this COVID pandemic world, when you start to think about how you can deliver products to people faster who don't necessarily want to go outside or be around a lot of people, I think e-commerce becomes a very enticing opportunity for not just us, but really any CPG brand, to your point, that it is just looking to kind of grow with their consumer.
Yeah, there's a massive acceleration happening right now, obviously, in how people are grocery shopping, and there's a revolution that's happening so much more quickly, whether it's like order and pick up or delivery, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's fascinating to see all of you guys like adapt and modify and change. But in the other sectors that are more mature, what is your experience from those? Like I would say gaming is kind of has a more mature digital money exchange. How do you feel like there's parallels in how you would try to convert someone to be a shop? Like, is there parallels in game and apparel shopper marketing versus a beverage, which is way cheaper, and a more common purchase?
So it's interesting. I'm the brand marketer in me wants to be like, well, it's all a matter of like every purchase you have is sort of an example of loyalty, right? It's like a badge that you wear, whether you're drinking it like a rock star can, or you're putting it on your body like a Nike shirt, or streaming it like Call of Duty, right? That all that says something about you. So I think for us, it's really like, how do we get people to continue to want to make energy a part of their lives, and how are our products? How can our products kind of infiltrate more parts of people's lives and break out of the expectations that maybe we have set already in terms of action, motorsports, or other things like that, right? And that goes for all of them, Red Bull, Monster, all those folks, right? It's the same thing. We all have a similar challenge, and so I think in that regard, it's, I don't want to say turn an energy drink into a lifestyle brand, because I feel like that's incredibly aspirational and lofty, but it's a little bit of that. I think that's what all products kind of ultimately strive for, right? Is to be a part of someone's life in a way that they can't live without it. Now, in terms of what have I learned from sort of the conversion bit and things like that? I mean, I think gaming and things like apparel have obviously gone very much so into like the digital first space. CPG is a little bit further behind, just period. And so when I start thinking about shoppable experiences across Facebook and Instagram, figuring out how to develop the back end for that. And that's, I think, where we really start being able to take a page out of maybe apparel, gaming, et cetera, and start moving a little bit more faster with our consumer.
Yeah, I think that one thing that like media mix modeling and like really traditional brands like Pepsi and how they to purchase their media and how they what they put out and the feedback loop that they get was traditionally, I think, slower than like just general digital. And also what I think is an interesting concept, is that are certain types of media like less measurable in certain models? Because that's certainly what I find. I find a lot of the models exist like that legacy existed and then are kind of in the cusp of being updated or being changed, really, really rely on traditional media streams to make the dent. And so like, let's say, for example, if commercials were like the number one way and GRPs, where you get that feedback loop about how that ultimate purchase at the grocery was happening, right? And then obviously YouTube came along and Google, and they were able to prove it with YouTube. And then Facebook came along and they were able to try to prove it, obviously, with Facebook, and trying to get it. But it seems like there's certain things, especially places that Rockstar would play, maybe more experiential, maybe more like micro environments that don't necessarily show up in the media mix. Like, how do you find that that's a challenge for you? Like a challenge to gain budget, a challenge to kind of speak to the more traditional sides of like the companies that you've worked for?
Yeah, I would say this year, specifically has been very tough in that. I mean, going even at Activision, I would say the fact that we couldn't rely, or they couldn't rely on events to drive video game releases and the things that we would typically do in person and get people feeling it and really kind of getting into the game. Those went away. And suddenly it was more about, okay, how do you leverage digital to do more of these releases and teases and campaigns and stuff. And yeah, I mean, with Rockstar, again, we go back to the idea of cans in hands. The best way to get get cans in people's hands is to give it to them at events, right? Whether it's music festivals or competitions or whatever it may be. And so, yeah, I mean, I would say we're feeling that, and I think we're even feeling it as we're starting to plan 2021. Are these events coming back? Should they be a part of our mix? And I wish I had an answer for you, because we're in the midst of trying to figure that out, and just how much do we want to put our eggs in that basket, or figure out a balance, or just say, hey, we're just going to go all digital or all somewhere else to kind of figure out if we can, for the first 6 months, and then figure out the last 6 months of the year are. These are all kind of ongoing conversations, but yeah, I mean, 100% we're feeling that sort of. I wouldn't say it's confusion, but certainly ambiguity, and it's not the most fun place to play.
You're not alone, all right?
Yeah.
I mean, all of us are, but how do you approach that? I had actually with brand innovators last week, women in brand marketing conversation with Alison Witherspoon, who's the CMO of Nissan. And she was saying that what they've done is they literally plan multiple scenarios, like an optimistic scenario, like she was talking about college sports, and like the optimistic scenario would there actually be fans, right? And then like the middle scenario is that they actually play, but there might not be fans, and then the worst case is that nothing happens and you have to like totally reallocate altogether. And so building 3 media plans, 3 programs, 3 things. And it was like, I was like, wow, that sounds like a lot of work for you. Your agency partners, like, how are you guys navigating that? And it doesn't really matter. Like the one like gaming, you were at Activision, it's kind of less impacted in certain ways. Definitely there's not E3 necessarily. Right. But how are you guys dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the conversations that I'm having with our leads is leaning on digital, creating content, trying to own these experiences more than we would have in the past, and drive people into these places. Whether we're doing more YouTube streams, we're creating our own. Let's just say not like concerts and stuff, but music content or whatever it may be, gaming content, etc. How can we take our communities behind the scenes, and really put them where maybe they wouldn't be? Because I think there's going to be a lot of forced FOMO at the beginning of next year, right? Where you may not feel comfortable in joining a lot of this stuff. So we as a brand can be that sort of that proxy for you. And so we're starting to figure out not so much media plans and stuff, but certainly trying to figure out from a content perspective how we can create that proxy vibe for our communities, and then connect with the media teams to figure out, okay, well, organic's not going to work, so this has to be a part of a bigger thing. Is it distribution partnerships? Is it setting some money aside to boost posts, or whatever it may be? So we're in the thick of all that planning right now. So
it's a lot. Yeah, I think, and what I kind of didn't really take into consideration exactly as I was learning more about the beverage category during COVID is like how much transacts at events, like at music festivals, maybe it's at, I don't know, theme parks, like wherever people go to get energy, right? Like they're not necessarily there right now. How does that relate to the messaging? Like if some of the messaging is related to like something that you could have done, but you can't do now, are you like changing, pivoting with the platforms that you pivot? Are you pivoting also the story that you're telling?
Likely, only because now it's not about how we're sponsoring an event. It's more about how we're working with this artist or this athlete. And it's about going deeper with them to create that connection with us and the brand, versus like just, putting signage everywhere at on the ground event and just kind of being there, right? And getting a lot of that earned media from people taking selfies or whatever, right? Now in my opinion, I think we now need to take a more active role in this conversation around culture and everything that we would have done otherwise on the ground. And now we need to own that and drive that conversation forward and leverage, maybe the dollars that we would have put to having space on the ground to now connecting with the right voices and whatnot in that space to help amplify our authenticity in other more creative ways versus just at an event.
Mm-hmm. So when you like, how custom is your approach to the different platforms? So like Discord, versus a Twitch, like, and how do you build your, your relationship with the consumer differently on those different platforms?
Sure. So yeah, I'm in the process of sort of finalizing all those channel roles and whatnot. And so I've gone through and, I like to use a Nikeism, this idea of master the fundamentals, right? And so kind of really trying to dig in and create a foundation for us, specifically on Rockstar, to really nail our strategy going forward. And so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and we're looking at TikTok and stuff as well, as one would, but putting roles to each one of those channels. So for Instagram, for us might be more of the behind the scenes. So how do we start creating content and opportunities where it feels like we're pulling the curtain back a little bit for our community? So that could be digging into a day in the life of our athletes, or what they do to train, or how they're surviving COVID themselves, things like that, right? Give people access they wouldn't normally have. On Twitter, we want to get to a point where it feels like you're having an active conversation with us, right? My example is, if you were in a group chat with us, what would it look like, right? It's memes, it's content, it's points of views, it's a little bit of, hey, did you just see this? If we have a really awesome win or podium shot or something like that for some of our athletes. And so that's kind of how we approach it. And this has been an awesome work in progress for me over the last couple of months to really take a step back and develop that foundation so that we can really hit the ground running now. So we are now just in the midst of sort of beginning to figure out how to kind of accelerate our content creation to hit those different types of channel roles, so that no matter where you enter, it looks, feels, acts like Rockstar, but it feels authentic to that channel, and it doesn't feel like you're just getting the same thing across every single platform as well.
So there is significant personalization by platform. Like when I know it's even more difficult to shoot content right now. So I think that you probably want to get as much out of what you can as possible, but you are like, how custom and how personal by platform and how bespoke, like, is it not going to do as well if it's on Reels, and on TikTok, or that same bit of content? Like, how do you personalization on those platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I always think you should make every channel distinct in some way, shape, or form, because then you're doing a disservice to your brand. You're doing a disservice to the consumers that follow you on different platforms and channels, right? And so people don't come. Well, maybe now they do because of Reels, but before Reels, people don't come to Instagram to be necessarily entertained in the same way you would be entertained on TikTok, right? It's a different language that you're speaking with, and so. The way I look at it is, we will always be Rockstar, and every brand is always its brand. But just like when I talk to you, or I talk to my mom, or I talk to my boss, or a best friend, my inflection and my tone and it slightly changes to be authentic to the person that I'm speaking with. But I'm always me. I never change, right? And that's how I look at it when it comes to our platforms. It's always going to be us. The way in which we're speaking needs to shift a little bit so that it doesn't feel jarring when consumers see it, both within a feed and also when they go from place to place for us. I mean, right now, because resources, to your point, all that stuff, sometimes you do have to put things on multiple channels, and especially when it's about programs. But when we start really digging into our actual organic content that we're creating, I'd love to. My goal is to cut and edit things in a way that Twitter, it's a little bit of a teaser driving you to the full edit on YouTube. On Instagram, it's the B-roll, and you have an IGTV of a cut of the full video that still drives you to YouTube because that's our library, right? And things like that. So really creating ultimately what it comes down to tactically is an epic deliverables list that ladders up to that sort of channel strategy, so that you're giving a different taste everywhere you go.
Do you know the duplication on platform for consumers when you're doing multiple platforms? Do you know if this person has seen and been exposed to the content? Can you close the loop between Instagram and YouTube, for example?
It's a great question.
Good reach. I know that's the holy grail, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure from a media perspective, when you're thinking about amplifying, you can do suppressions and such to ensure that you're not double counting folks in terms of what you're showing people to in terms of your ads. From organic, it's obviously a little bit harder to do that. But I think that's also why, no matter what, it's important to give everybody different tastes. So even if they are going from place to place, it always feels fresh and oh, this is something new. And they can come to expect that there's value in following you across all these channels versus just, being, I get what I need from Instagram or whatever it may be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of your friends when they're posting the same exact thing on Insta and Facebook, you're like, I'm going to like this twice because I care about you, but it's kind of annoying because I've already seen it.
Exactly.
We have some questions. So I'm going to, let's see here. Do you find that one place of unity between existing customers and new is on purpose? Does Pepsi's energy portfolio focus on purpose? Okay. So it's kind of two questions.
Okay, so the first one is, does Pepsi Energy Portfolio focus on purpose?
Yes.
And then, okay.
And the second one is between existing and new customers, and where's the space of unity between the two?
Sure. So I'll tackle the customer question first. So, I mean, much like most brands, I have to imagine, right, are sort of, we're looking to get after the younger generation, right? We want Gen Z. We want to invite more folks into to enjoy our products. But in terms of the ones who have been with us forever, they're the millennials, right? They're even slightly older millennials. Rockstar's been around for quite some time at this point, and so we, I think. There is crossover in how you talk to both of those folks, but the beauty of social, I think, is that you can create a sharp point for how to talk to that aspirational consumer, which in my opinion is the Gen Z, right? culture is created by the youth. They're the ones with the fingers on the pulse of everything. And so we need to make sure that as we create our content and our approach, that we're staying true to our core and not forgetting sort of what's endemic to us, whether it be action, motorsports, skate and surf, all the things that have made us who we are and brought us to where we're at currently, and continue to inject that, but with fresh blood and new life and a fresh lens that'll impact Gen Z, whether it's bringing a more purposeful approach to the ways we talk and include our athletes in terms of what makes them tick other than just their sport. What do they like? How can we get them more involved, give them a platform? Or something totally new where now we have a point of view on memes and we can just be a part of those fun conversations. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and then in terms of purpose, like that could get a little of a weighty conversation. But I will say, personally, I think it's important for brands to understand the value that they're bringing to consumers and understanding the needs that they're trying to fulfill. And the need isn't necessarily I need to buy something. The need is I need to feel something. I need something. I'm missing something, right? So when I'm thinking about my content strategy, I'm thinking about that purpose. And it's how is my product and brand trying to fulfill a need, and then how are we creating to ensure that they're getting that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that we consume, they have bigger meaning than just what they are to us. Like, I drink almond milk. I don't know. I care about my health. I'm into new alternative foods and healing modalities. Like, do you know what I mean? It tells a certain story. So you have that too, that you're constantly building with the brand of Rockstar. We have another question here. Automation and personalization seem to conflict. So how do you really combine them well?
That's a good question. So, I think I would, like right off the bat, I kind of want to be like, automation can be personalization, but personalization isn't necessarily automation. And so, I think there's parts of being the way to make automation feel personalized and warm, I think, is to kind of go back to what we talked about earlier around understanding the consumer journey and then finding those moments of truth. So let's just say, you've got an app, and after 10 visits to the app, things drop off. Well, then you should create a moment that is automated at their eighth visit, being like, hey, don't forget to do this thing. Or at their 10th visit, hey, here's an incentive to come back for an 11th time, or what have you, right? And that's where automation, I think, helps with driving engagement. And then you use additional personalization to create more of a warmer relationship by the content that you're surfacing up in, feeds or even in emails, based off of some of the more, maybe implicit things that you're finding out, whether it's search behaviors or general kind of segment characteristics that you can kind of pull out and be like, I know that these have a propensity to buy or engage or do something else. But for me, the automation comes at finding those tipping points, tackle those tipping points to drive the desired behavior or change the behavior, and then use personalization to keep them in there.
I mean, and that must be also something that to kind of piggyback off on what you were saying about your consumer you're doing now, because your loyal consumer, the older millennial, I'm Gen X, but I remember Rockstar. I remember Rockstar being like super hip at clubs, like the thing. How about lapsed? Do you guys also think about like lapsed older millennials? It's not only growing your Gen Z, it's because in gaming we talk about that all the time, right? That lapsed user, the person that played the last Call of Duty, but they're not playing this new one on you, and you want to get them. Like, and how does that kind of how are you utilizing maybe automation for that too, to re-engage this lapsed consumer? That must be more difficult in beverage than it is in games, right?
For sure. And, interestingly, I feel like most of the conversations I've had is about like kind of maintaining who we have and attracting new folks. It's less about how do we plug the leaky, how do we plug the funnel, the leaky bucket or whatever. And so I think, again, to go back to like e-commerce, first party owned platforms. That's why those things are important, right? Because then we do know who's kind of fallen out of the bucket, who's left the funnel, and then we can try to pull them back with coupons or things like that. And I'm sure through there are certain segments that we know have bought in X X days. I've not dived right into those quite just yet. I'm very focused on sort of social strategy, but that's for me again why first party data is so important.
Yeah, but maybe there's a reason. I mean, you're we were talking when we were prepping about this and how it needed to be like it. You're so new to Rockstar. There's so many things that you're building and creating and learning right now. So maybe there's a reason why lapsed users are not a thing. I know in games, lapsed users always seem to be one of the, and most marketing plans I've seen like are often, one of the things mentioned. But maybe there's a reason our lapsed consumers are not coming back. But I can't imagine that would be the case because I know just from personal experience, sometimes you move away from something and then you come back to it later. It's just
right. And that's why for me, I'm like, I think this is actually fascinating because if I can go to folks who were drinking Rockstar 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and understand why they left, maybe they couldn't find it anymore, or there was some other reason, then I can provide them like sort of the opposite of that, right? We're like, actually here, no, it's right here. Here's the closest store you can find it or whatever it may be, and really leverage that data to get them to, get cans in hands.
Yeah. And it's also the perception thing. Like my perception of Rockstar will always be what I remember of it, which is like clubbing in Hollywood and do you know what I mean? Like them like hiring like the girls to be like passing it out and whatever. It was kind of at the beginning and the dawn of the brand, but that's also an advantage you have, right? Because my brand, like maybe Gen Z, you're like proving your coolness as compared to some, more younger disruptor brands. But for me, you're more, you already have that. Do you know what I mean? I already have that image imprinted that you probably, you've grown from, but yeah.
Yep. 100%. And so the goal is to leverage that sort of cachet that we already have and use that as a foundation to now try to attract a new generation of folks who are going to be super pumped to see us all over the place and ask for us at clubs and whatever it may be. So.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Gabriel and Gabrielle, for closing out such an amazing day on this joint webinar hosted by Turtle on personalization and this Brands Innovators Livecast on digital innovation. So a special thank you to our speakers for such engaging and insightful conversations today. I know I personally took so much from each of their sessions. We hope you all will join us again for our next Brand Innovators Livecast tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. For part 4 of Influencer Marketing, a livecast hosted by Influential. We'll be joined by marketing leaders from Therabody, Elf Beauty, Gallo Wines, Taco John's, and more. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and we hope to see you again.